All right, let's dive into one of the most powerful, most important parts of the Indian Constitution, Article 13. I want you to think of it as the ultimate guardian, the final line of defense for your fundamental rights. It's what gives them their real bite.
I mean, have you ever really thought about that? Let's say a government passes a new law. What if that law steps on your freedom of speech or messes with your right to equality? What's the safety switch that stops that from happening?
Well, the answer is Article 13. And it's not just some dry legal text. It's a powerful shield built right into the Constitution itself, and its whole job is to protect every single citizen from unfair laws.
So let's get right to the heart of it. What makes this article so crucial? It is the very engine that gives your fundamental rights their power.
The real power of Article 13 is just how direct it is. It says flat out that any law that clashes with your fundamental rights is void. Done. It's basically a constitutional veto. It doesn't matter who made the law or how popular it is. If it crosses that line, it's invalid.
Now, to do its job properly, Article 13 has to be a bit of a time traveler. It's got to look backwards at all the laws that existed before the Constitution, and it has to look forwards at all the new laws that will ever be made.
So it has this really clever two-pronged attack. First, you've got Clause 1. Think of it like a quality check on history. It goes through all the old laws we inherited from before independence and says, nope, this part doesn't work with our new rights, so it's gone. Then you have Clause 2, which is all about the future. It's a direct order to the state, basically saying, don't even think about making a law that takes away these rights.
Okay, but you can't just point at a law and say, you're void, and walk away. That would be chaos. So over the years, the courts have developed a specific set of tools, you can think of them as legal doctrines, to apply Article 13 in a really precise and fair way. Let's break them down.
So this first tool is all about surgical precision. Imagine you're baking a cake and you find one bad cherry in the mix. You're not going to throw out the whole cake, are you? Of course not. You just pick out that one bad cherry. That is exactly what the Doctrine of Separability is. The court tries to save the good parts of a law and just strike down the unconstitutional bit.
But, how does a court decide if that bad cherry can be removed without ruining the whole cake? Well, in a really famous case, the Supreme Court laid out a simple test. First, they ask, what did the lawmakers actually intend to do here? Second, if the good parts and the bad parts are all tangled up and you can't separate them, then sorry, the whole law has to go. And third, if you take out the bad part and the rest of the law just doesn't make any sense anymore, again, the entire thing gets tossed out.
This next one is pretty fascinating. It's called the Doctrine of Eclipse. So picture an old law from before the Constitution, and it clashes with a fundamental right. It's like the sun being covered by a cloud. The sun, that's the law, it isn't gone, it's just temporarily hidden, or eclipsed by the fundamental right, which is the cloud. Now, if the Constitution ever gets amended and that cloud moves away, poof, the old law can shine again and become fully active. It's not dead, it's just sleeping.
So what about you? Could you just decide one day to say, you know what, I don't really need my right to equality today, I'll waive it? The Supreme Court's answer to that was a very firm no. Fundamental rights aren't some personal perk that you can trade away. They're a core duty of the state, something essential for the health of the entire democracy.
And all of this leads us to the biggest, most dramatic constitutional fight in India's history, a question that put Parliament and the Supreme Court on a collision course.
And here it is, the central question. Article 13 says no law can take away fundamental rights. Simple enough, right? But what if Parliament doesn't pass a normal law? What if it passes a constitutional amendment to change one of those rights? Is an amendment a law? The answer to this single question would decide everything. Because if it is a law, it's void. And if it's not, then Parliament's power is pretty much absolute.
What happened next was this epic, decades-long tug-of-war, with power swinging back and forth between Parliament and the judiciary in a series of huge landmark cases. Just look at this timeline. It's like a legal thriller. In 1951, the court says, yep, Parliament can do it. Then, 16 years later in the Golok-Nath case, boom, the court does a complete 180 and says, actually, no, an amendment is a law and you can't touch fundamental rights. So what does Parliament do? In 1971, it strikes back, passing an amendment that basically says, oh yes, we can. It was a showdown, and it all led to one final decisive case.
And this quote from that Golok-Nath ruling really tells you everything about how the court was feeling. A transcendental position. What they meant was that these rights are sacred. They're above the normal, everyday business of making laws. They were meant to be kept completely out of Parliament's reach. That is a seriously powerful statement.
So, how do you resolve a conflict this huge? The answer came in 1973 in the legendary case of Ananda Bharti case. And it gave us one of the most important legal ideas in the entire world. The court came up with an absolutely brilliant compromise. First, it handed a victory to Parliament. It said, yes, Parliament does have the power to amend any part of the Constitution. That includes the chapter on fundamental rights.
But, and this is probably one of the most important buts in legal history, the court said that this power has a limit. Parliament can amend, but it cannot damage or destroy the basic structure of the Constitution. The core ideas, the very soul of the document, has to stay intact. And just like that, the basic structure doctrine was born. This became the new ultimate shield. It's a revolutionary idea that ensures the core principles of our democracy, things like the rule of law, secularism, and freedom, can never be amended away. So while Article 13 protects you from bad laws, the basic structure doctrine protects the Constitution itself.
And this leaves us with one last fascinating thought. The basic structure isn't actually written down anywhere. There's no list. It's a living idea, defined by the Supreme Court case by case, which means that in this ongoing conversation of democracy, the ultimate power to define what's truly fundamental about the nation, well, that power rests with the judiciary. It's a continuous balancing act, and it all started with that simple, powerful idea in Article 13.